you, Sharon, and thank you all. Looks like we're up to about 40 participants, so that's great. My goal today is to help get everybody on the same page with regard to an understanding of, how the real estate tax system works in Iowa and specifically in Scott County. You may find nuances from county to county, but you'll certainly find differences amongst states. So we're going to be Iowa focused here, and I'm going to try to answer your questions as we go along. And as Sharon said, if you have a question, do your best to attempt to put it in the chat box. And if there's a question out there, I'll ask Kathy or Sharon to remind me. I'll try to keep an eye on that screen as well, so that we can stay on the topic in front of us throughout the presentation. And certainly there'll be plenty of time at the end of the presentation for questions as well. But and if I see a question that I may want you to clarify, then I'll probably call on you to unmute yourself and explain it a little further. So I'll do my best. But as always, I'm by no means the expert on this topic. I'll do my best. And if there's something that I'm going to have to research and get back to you, I will submit those answers back to Sharon and Kathy, and then they can disseminate them to the group, both the question and the answer. So we'll do our best here today. So obviously, hot topic. Oh, there's the phone's ringing already, as I predicted. A hot topic with the assessments just having come out, and everybody's abuzz about their values being up, and is this going to translate into higher taxes and all those kind of things. So we're gonna dive into that topic today, and hopefully dispel some rumors and share with you a little information, perhaps have a laugh or two, I hope. And so let's just dive in. All right, so there's 5 topics I really want to cover here today. First and foremost, how your tax bill is created and collected. Where does all the information come from? Who has a role? What role do they play? Who to blame when your taxes go up? And how to research, what goes into those taxes. We'll talk more specifically about assessments and rollback, the role that the assessor plays, the role that the state plays in those 2 important numbers. We'll talk about how that then translates into the different tax districts and levies, how to figure out what the levy is made up of on your particular property or your customer's property. I'm going to share with you a tool to use to estimate what the taxes might be on a new construction home or property, and then perhaps also, if it's not a new home, but a major addition to the home that is going to affect the tax valuation. And then I'll share with you just some general information about our office, the volumes of information and customers coming through. I'm going to point out in the chat box, at the very top of that, you'll find my name and direct phone number. So I would encourage any or all of you, call me anytime. Be happy to answer your questions, solve a problem, dig in and figure something out, and either answer it on the spot or get back to you. I love that part of my job. So, and then secondly, Kathy has posted the links that were sent to you via email that I had shared with Sharon that I'll be referencing in part today. So let's dive in. I'm going to start with a couple of quotes of 2 favorite quotes of mine. And the first, I think, is important to keep in mind as this elected politician is speaking to you about taxes, right? Do you trust this guy and what he's going to say? Well, here's one of my favorites. We use statistics the same way that a drunk uses a lamppost, for support rather than illumination. So with that in mind, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'll do my best, but know that everyone in the world has their own personal slant on every topic. So I have mine, and you'll see if you can catch it. My other favorite quote comes from my all-time favorite economist, Tom Sowell. born a Marxist, now a conservative, but Tom has a unique ability to put very complicated things in very simple terms. And here's a great example. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. We in government have to understand, and it drove me as a planning and zoning commissioner and as a county supervisor, and now as a treasurer. If I say yes to you, I'm saying no to somebody else. If I say yes to your program, I'm saying no to the people that want their taxes lowered, and vice versa. If I pledge to lower your taxes, that's going to come at a cost of perhaps fewer services for those citizens. So it's never fun. It's never easy having to make those tough decisions. But we all must keep in mind who we're affecting when we make those decisions. All right, so your tax bill arrives in the mail, and it's complicated. There's a lot of information on here. We put a lot of information on there that we know rarely gets read. But if you'll take the time and study that thing, you'll find most of the information we're going to talk about today buried in here somewhere. So, first and foremost, what kind of a mood are you in when you receive your tax bill? Right? This one pretty well sums it up. It's not a happy day. Real estate taxes, I will absolutely agree with you. They're high, and they seem to be going higher all the time. Well, who are the people responsible for this? I think we found them. All right. How are those taxes, how are they divvied up, if you will, throughout the county? Here's some perhaps interesting numbers to you. Total of $367 million in taxes last year. And as you can see, about 80% of it goes to cities and schools. So that's where the lion's share of your property tax dollars go. Now, if you're out in the county, you're not paying any city taxes, but you're paying higher county taxes and vice versa. School districts vary, cities vary in their levies. Assessed values differ by neighborhood. So this is by no means reflective of any one person's breakdown on their tax bill, but these are totals for the county. So between the big three, the city, schools, and counties, there's almost about 97% of all the taxes you pay throughout the county. The rest, the college, the community college, the assessor's offices, extension office, different districts, fire districts, water districts, whatever, make up that little bitty 2.5% to 3% of the rest of it. So anyway, all right, so we are going to walk you through who all plays a role in putting this thing together. And it all starts with the assessor. I'll share with you a timeline in a few minutes that shows, the 4-year process from start to finish of the creation and execution and collection of your tax bill. But the assessor starts it all. Their first job really is to determine the property type. That may sound simple, but they've got to classify that property as residential, multifamily, commercial, industrial, ag residential, railroad, utility, whatever that property type may be. It is the assessor's job to make sure they're accurate. And I bring that up because there's a home in Bettendorf, and the owner has been fighting with the county assessor for many years, not only of the valuation that they've placed on it, but the property type. This person is a professional, as outwardly recognized by anyone in the community, but claims that he is a farmer. He's got a pole barn. He's got I think it's about a 10-acre property. He's got a pole barn. He's got a little John Deere utility tractor, and I think some chickens or a goat or something, and wants us all to believe that he's a farmer and therefore enjoy farm taxation, exemption from certain taxes, the right not to have to follow building codes, all that kind of stuff. And the assessor has consistently disagreed, so they continue to do battle. So it's a very important role they play to accurately determine a property type. Most of their time, however, is spent on valuation of property. We'll dive into that a little deeper, obviously, but their job is to value your property as accurately as possible with regard to its market value. People have lots of misconceptions about, they want the number high, or some people think, well, it's always a little bit low. Really, their job is to nail it as close as possible. The second party into the mix is primarily the state, but to some small extent the federal government. The state sets rollback, or the percentage of the assessed value that is taxable. And we'll spend some time talking about those calculations and how that works, but that's a very, very important role. Rollback today is 54%. On residential property. So on $100,000 property, you're paying taxes on $54,000 and change. What that will be next year, I'll share my guesses in just a few minutes. The other thing they do is they establish and set the available credits, exemptions and credits for properties. We're all familiar with the homestead exemption. That anyone who occupies the home as their primary residence is entitled to take. But there are dozens of others. Veterans credits and exemptions. There's some ag exemptions, there's utility exemptions, there's energy exemptions for businesses, lots of different types of credits. The next party, the big three that I talked about, the county, the cities, and the schools, they know they have services that they have to provide and some that they want to provide. So they have to figure out, what's this all going to cost us for this next fiscal year? And so that becomes their budget. From that, they then know from the assessor and the state what level of taxable value of property exists within their district. If it's a school, within the school district. If it's the county, it's the entire county. If it's a city, it's within the city limits of that established incorporated town or city. So from that, they can back into, if you will, their levy. So they meet as a board, they meet as a council, and go over their budgets, and then back into a levy that ends up on your tax return. And it's not just the city, county, and schools. There's other taxing entities that I had referenced: the college, the community college, districts, extension, the assessor, and all those little ones that are also doing the same thing at that same time, setting their budgets, backing into a levy. The next party, and it's another county office, is the auditor's office. Most people think of them as running elections, and that's absolutely true. At certain times of the year, they are very, very busy with elections. But the ongoing business of the auditor is to pay the bills of the county. And in this particular discussion, they do two very important roles. First of all, they approve all property boundaries. So let's say, for instance, there's an 80-acre parcel of farmland that's going to be developed into residential lots. It's the auditor's job to make sure that every square inch of that 80 acres gets accounted for, that the surveyor and the developer are accurately describing those lots, including outlots and parks and schools and whatever else might be going into that particular neighborhood, if you will, and set aside or setbacks on streets. All of that kind of stuff needs to be agreed to and finalized by the auditor's office, so that those legal descriptions will stand the test of time on deeds and mortgages and transfers and all kinds of other documents, and including taxation. The other role of the auditor here is, after the state has set its rollback and the cities and the schools and the taxing districts have set their levy, the auditor calculates that levy by district. So for instance, if you live in Northeast Davenport and you live within the Bettendorf School District, you're paying county taxes you're paying City of Davenport taxes, you're paying Bettendorf School District taxes, and then all these other ones listed in the lower right. And that becomes a total levy. And we'll show you where to find that information. It's also in the links, but I'll show you how to find that. All right, then coming up, batting cleanup is the treasurer, yours truly. And it's not me, it's the wonderful folks that work for me, but you know, we take this information from the auditor and we create and distribute, mail to you and collect your tax bill and remit those taxes then to all those taxing authorities. In other words, we only keep 17% of it for the county. The rest of it goes to all those other taxing entities. So here's what the timeline looks like. And over this 4-year period, I want to kind of walk you through the different things that are happening. So in that first year, throughout the entire year, those assessors, and I say assessors because in Scott County we have 2. We're one of, I think, 8 or 9 counties that have not only a county assessor, but there's a city, in our case, a City of Davenport assessor that is charged with performing those duties just within the city limits of Davenport. So their job is to collect all of that sales data for the entire year, compile that, and with every single sale, they're looking at it to try to determine, did we hit the mark? We had it valued at $250, it sold for $300. Why were we off the mark? Why were we low or high, or we were dead on, and everything in that neighborhood we seem to hit pretty well. You know, so they're analyzing that data, and the reason they do so is the state Department of Revenue charges them with being very, very accurate with that data, with their assessments, if you will. Every year they get tested, and every year they have to be within 5% of dead accurate. They can average no more than 105% or no less than 95% of assessed value for all of those sales. Now they get to throw out non-arm's length transactions. If I have a house and I sell it to my son at half price, that doesn't count in this data because it's obviously a non-arm's length transaction. They also get to throw out properties that have had major changes made to them since they were last assessed. Let's say a major addition gets made, or a house gets torn down and the vacant lot gets sold, or something like that. They have the right to throw those out. They simply have to justify it. And I'm happy to say, I'm kind of proud to say that both of our assessors, using the 2022 sales data, both averaged 99% of assessed value or of sale price value in their assessments this last year. In a very volatile market, I'd say that's pretty good. If they're outside of that 5% either way range, the state comes back in and does what's called an equalization order. They automatically adjust all properties within that classification to get that assessed value totals to be back within range. So it's kind of a slap on the wrist for an assessor. So they work very hard to make sure that their assessments are accurate. Now, are there exceptions? Absolutely. The range of assessed values, I know for the Scott County assessor, was from like 75% to 140% this last year. They don't nail every single one, but on average they do. And there's a process that we'll talk about here if you feel that yours is inaccurate. So they draw a line on the sand on the following January 1, and that becomes the assessment date, the date that property is assumed to have been valued. And then they send out the notifications to the taxpayers by April 1 of the following year, of that year. So in our next slide, we'll see a sample of that, but those are the letters that everybody is pretty up in arms about right now, because on average statewide, it's the real estate values, at least for residential, are up about 20%, somewhere in that range. After April 1, there's about a 25-day period where you can request an informal review of your assessment. Sometimes it's a phone call. Sometimes it's a visit to the assessor's office or a more formal meeting. They're pretty darn busy in the month of April. The other option to you, and most commercial businesses use this, is to appeal to the local board of review. Those people are meeting. They started this morning at 10 o'clock, and they are sitting all day for a month listening to people make their arguments, make their case that my property is not really worth this much. Here's my appraisals, here's my comparable sales, here's my whatever data they bring to the table. So then once those boards of review are done listening to those protests, they've got until June 15th to wrap up their decisions and submit them. And then the assessors submit all of that data, because that becomes the total valuation to the Department of Revenue director, where they start to do their job. So the Department of Revenue calculates rollback. They look at all of the, let's say, we'll talk residential, look, all of the residential valuations across the state, adjusted for appeals, and they calculate what that average total is. And let's say it's up 20% for this year. They then calculate and issue a rollback number, or the percentage of assessed value that a property would be taxed at. And they do so to limit growth in that category, in this case, residential property, to no more than 3% per year. So even though your property went up 20% in value, the statewide average growth in taxable value will be calculated to be no more than 3%. Now, that's by no means a guarantee that your property is only going to go up 3% in taxable value. There may be extenuating circumstances. It may have already been up 40% in value because you put an addition on. Well, all bets are off in that case. You're going to go up more than 3%, or it may go up less than 3%. But the statewide average, adjusted average, will be limited to 3%. I'm not seeing questions in the chat box, but if I will take a little pause here if anyone wants to dive into that part a little more. All right, so rollback's been established. Then all those taxing authorities get to work. They are reviewing their budgets, and they know now what the taxable valuation in their district is going to be. So they can complete their budgets, they can back into a levy and submit that to the state to be published. So then by March 31st, they've done that. By July 1, the auditors have done their job. They've created all those tax levy sheets, and they give those to my office to produce and calculate all these tax bills that get sent out in August every year. In September, the first half of that tax year's taxes are due, and the following March, the second half are due. So you can see it truly is a 4-year process, and we're always in the middle of each one of these steps for a different year. So it can be very confusing when you say, my taxes are whatever. Well, our first question is going to be, what year are we talking about? Are we talking about the year of the budget, the year of the assessment, the year of collection? What are we talking about? All right, so here's that assessment notification that came in the mail. Anyone that owns property in the state of Iowa gets one looking something like this. It says here's how much your residential, in my case, my residential valuation was last year. Here's how much it is this year. Everybody's head goes crazy, and then you start seeing this kind of stuff on Facebook. Find someone who values you as much as the Iowa assessors value your home, right? We heard a lot of this, and there's lots of miscommunication and misunderstanding as to how this works. Here's a sample of some of the mail that I got this last month. There's a person who lives out in the county. I won't say where. I've blanked out their name and address to protect the innocent, but you can see he feels pretty strongly about this. He even took the time to write on a tea bag. I thought that was rather clever. Taxed enough already. And off to the right, he has already done the math and figured out, well, my taxable or my assessed value went up 21%. So my taxes are going to go up 21%. I think I've just explained to you that that's not necessarily the case, but there's a lot of people who believe that. The ironic thing, I did look up this property, and actually I was talking to this assessor upstairs about this on the phone when I got this, and I did share what neighborhood it was in. And he said, well, that's got to be either so-and-so or so-and-so. I'm like, oh yeah, it's the second of the two. And so he's looking at it with me online, and turns out, yeah, his assessed value went up from 300 something to 414,000, I think it was. But in the sales data, we could both plainly see that he paid $470,000 last fall for this property. And the assessor immediately said, oh, we'll flag that one for a relook. I'm like, oh crap, I just made that guy's day. He's going to send me another tea bag. But whatever, is the assessor's job is to nail that valuation, and the sale of a property is probably the best indicator of that. So how much were values up in our area? Here's a snapshot of the different classifications, the major ones anyway. And off to the right, in the right-hand column, the percentage change in each of those categories. Note that this is a number that is net of additions and subtractions. So if 100 new homes were built in Scott County, well, those 100 new homes are part of that valuation change. The state adjusts for all of that, but you're looking at about a 20% increase in residential values for the county, and about a 15% increase for the city of Davenport. So, you know, pretty strong numbers and really indicative of what's going on throughout the state. So I did talk about that appeal process. I thought I'd share with you a couple pieces of information about that. Today is the final day to appeal to those boards of review. Even though they've started listening to hearings today, my understanding is you can still submit for an appeal. My advice to you would be contact the assessor's office to make sure that you're doing that in a way that's going to count and you get your foot in the door. And as I said, you can submit any information that's available to you, you know, some comparable sales data, pictures of the interior of your home to prove that it's not as nice as what the assessor thinks it might be, recent market value or realtor's market value analysis on that property. As you can see, the assessors have both been very busy. They both have about the same number of parcels that they're charged with valuing. Lots of phone calls. In the case of the two assessors, Davenport has listened to 120 formal hearings, the county 190, and the board of review petitions, you can see 206 and 250 respectively. These numbers are as of last Friday. In talking to the Davenport assessor, of those 120 informal hearings, I think one, the assessor said, no, it's actually worth more than what we had it assessed for. All the others were either left alone or lowered, and I don't know the breakdown of those. And I think it's similar for the Scott County assessor. So it can certainly pay off to go argue your case and to try to convince them that your property is not worth it, what they estimated it to be. Know that, you know, they've got 80,000+ properties to assess every year. Excuse me. And they cannot possibly pour over each individual one. So they're making some neighborhood estimates and some marketplace estimates, if you will, in coming up with these numbers. So the process allows you to make your case. Excuse me. I want you to drive home the point that the assessed value of a property does not equal the taxable value. There's rollback in just about every category of some form or another. So if rollback and levy are the key, then how does that work? Well, let's start with looking at the state of Iowa rollback history. This is in one of the links that's in the chat that you can go to on your own. I always forget the name of this site. And so I searched for Iowa rollback history, and this page will come up. So you can see, if you look down the residential column, excuse me, it's ranged from up in the 80% range down to low of 45% in 2005. And the consensus seems to be that next year it's going to be in that 47, 46% range, somewhere in there. So because of a high increase in valuations, the state will have to adjust the rollback number to reflect and to result in that no more than 3% increase. There's a multi-residential column that appeared in 2015, and the legislature said, you know what, we're going to gradually ratchet that down to equal the residential number, and that's why it disappeared in the last 2 years. It's now the same rollback as residential numbers. Ag and residential are the only two classifications that go through the rollback calculation process. The others, if they have any rollback at all, are sent by the state legislature and don't move until they touch them again. So, excuse me, commercial industrial are at 90%, utilities pay 100%, railroads 90%. And so those don't get touched from year to year. The numbers in brackets to the right are simply the limitations in growth. So you can see that growth limitation started out at 6% and is now down to 3% growth for ag and residential. I could do a whole nother seminar on ag valuation. I won't go into that today, except to say that it is not a market value-based approach. It is a production-based approach. One could argue whether that's fair or not, but this system really exists not to pick on or to favor any one property owner. It's to distribute the burden amongst the classes. So I could make some pretty good arguments that right now commercial and industrial are really carrying the load, if you will, but I'd be curious to hear your arguments as well. Looks like we've got a question in the chat. Okay, thanks for all the info with the 2023 taxes covering the period of 7/1/23 to 6/30/24 and being paid in September and March of 25. When do the funds get paid to taxing authorities, and do you know which year's budget they are included in as their revenue? The property tax year or the following year when collected? That's a very good question. I gotta study this a little bit. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, back to I'm going to see if I can go back to, here we are. So we are actually in the 2022 tax year. And so the budgets that were just approved were for the 2022 tax year, payable in late 23 and 24. Do I have that right? I believe. And so your question is, whether it gets funds to the tax authorities, you know which year's budget they're included in as their tax revenue. Yeah, there's going to be a year delay. They set a budget and they're collecting money in a future year. I don't know if I've answered that question accurately or not, but there is some delay. Doug, my number's in the chat box. I'd love it if you'd call me and let's have this discussion, and I can maybe research a little further and make sure I've got my story straight here. But that is a good and a very, very frequent question and a confusing one, especially as real estate agents and attorneys do closings. So, all right, let's get back to where I was on rollback. Okay. All right, so this is simply some additional language that goes into what I've already explained about that aggregate value increase. The limit is 3% growth, and that's for ag and residential. I just want to drive that home, not the 20% you're seeing on your assessed value increase. So then the auditor's office calculates all these levies or receives all these levies and calculates on their second page. And again, the link to this is in those chat notes. Here's a portion of the second page, if you will. So you'll see all the different districts, and this includes TIFs and SMIDs, tax increment financing districts. SMID is self-sustaining municipal investment district, I think it stands for. Where the SMID actually has a higher tax rate because the members of that neighborhood vote to be taxed at a higher rate, and as so long as those additional taxes are spent only on improvements to their district. TIF is TIF, it's tax increment financing where the future taxes pay for current improvements and so forth. So you can see every column is represented here. The total levy down the middle is made up of all those to the right: the county, school, community college, city, assessor, and other. Other is a combination of those taxing districts like fire districts and the extension service and whatnot. And your particular levy depends upon, again, which city and or school that you reside in, that this property exists within. And then you'll see on the fourth page of this particular report, all of the non-city properties, all of the county, and that's on a township by township basis. Every township has taxing authority, and so they may vary by just a little bit, and so they'll have different levies. So the assessor submits all of those, and off to the races those taxing authorities go. I want to illustrate for you an example here. I picked a property in Eldridge in this particular case, looked at what its assessed value was and then what it went to with this most recent assessed value increase. It was up about 20.5%. You multiply that by a rollback, so they're paying taxes this last September and this March on 168,000 of value. So if the state comes back with a rollback, let's say of 46.5%, kind of in the middle of the numbers that I'm hearing, that would result in this case, a 3.5% increase in taxable value for the next tax year. If the levies stay the same, and that's a big if, but if they were to stay the same, then therefore it's a 3.5% tax increase, not a 20.5% tax increase. Okay. All right, on to, there's a tool. If you go and you'll see government highlighted here, hold your cursor over that and scroll down to treasurer. And then in the treasurer's office, you'll see on the left, you'll see a listing for tax calculator. This is that tool that you can use to calculate the estimated taxes on a newly constructed structure. So in this case, I just plugged in $400,000 of value. You'll click on that next box on the down arrow to pick which type of property it is. In this case, I picked residential. So it automatically pre-populates the rollback number. You can put in exemptions. In this particular case, I made the assumption that the occupant was a veteran who had served during combat times. Even if they were not directly involved in combat, they served during a war or a declared military period of time. That person would be eligible for an $1,852 reduction in taxable value, or in other words, an exemption. And that's opposed to a credit, which is a dollar for dollar credit against the amount owed, like homestead exemption. So there's some differences in how those things are calculated. The next drop down box is where you pick the city and school district that the property is in. The next box is where you could put credits. I just estimated homestead for this property and plug that in just for illustration purposes. And then it automatically calculates not only the individual taxing authority dollar amounts, but the total is at the bottom. So you plug in those numbers and hit go, and it'll produce these results. Kind of a handy tool, especially for home builders, mortgage companies who might be talking to people wanting to buy a home, build a home, a newly constructed home, those kind of things. It does see some frequent use. Questions? Is there a VA disability exemption? There is a disability exemption for veterans. Unfortunately, in Iowa, you must be 100% disabled to receive that exemption or that credit, actually, I think in this case. There's a difference between disability and the one I've listed on this particular page, where it's simply having served during wartime or during conflict periods of time. So if you like, again, call me. I can dig in and perhaps maybe answer your more specific questions. There's a question: are there any plans to change the percent to a sliding scale? Oh, for VA? Boy, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to. We do get a lot of call for that, and there's a lot of disappointed faces when we indicate that it's you've got to be 100% disabled. So talk to your legislators would be my best. Legislators would be my best advice there. And they're in their last week, and they don't want to be bothered today. So you'll have to wait till next year, unfortunately. But you know, I'll take that as in part my mission. We talk to them all the time, and I'll ask around and I'll bring that up and I'll keep pressuring that, because I would agree with you. I'd like to see some more disability exemption or credits for partially disabled veterans. No doubt about that. All right, on to just some general information about my department. Little screen that shows you some of the volumes we deal with. As I indicated, there's 81,000 parcels in the county. We collect taxes on those twice a year. So, you know, 162,000 tax payments we get every year. How do people make those? Well, here you can see the breakdown, and those numbers are moving target out. My next slide will show you how those are moving for taxes, at least. But you know, COVID was, in this case, was friendly to us in that more people are paying online and by mail than used to, and fewer are coming here in person. The escrow number is fairly stable at 26%. People paying their taxes through their mortgage payment. So again, total real estate taxes countywide of $367 million. The other big part of our business is vehicles. So we renew all license plates and stickers and registrations, and we also issue new titles to people retitling a vehicle, purchasing a vehicle, bringing a vehicle into our state for the first time, all those situations. So renewals, about 220,000 of those a year, 36% pay online, which is great. 48% do still come here in person, and 16% by mail. Obviously, you're not paying for vehicles through a mortgage escrow. And then new titles, about 59,000 of those. Those numbers are down, COVID induced, I would say, not so much because of the economy, but more so because manufacturers of vehicles weren't able to get parts and couldn't produce the vehicles, couldn't complete the vehicles, if you will, which would have ended up on new dealer lots. And so there was a reduction in our business there. It's back on the rise again this year. Vehicle dealer lots seem to be fuller, and we're seeing more volumes there. So virtually all of those are in person, because those are very complicated, and we need to have documents produced to be able to do that. So our counter traffic, both downtown here in my office and at our county general store on West Kimberly Road, total about 50,000 a year, and that's been growing and growing. But a lot of folks coming to visit us. which kind of brings up the topic of appointments, something we instituted towards the beginning of COVID. Obviously, we were required to be limited with how many people we could have in the room, no face-to-face contact without some sort of barrier, mask or screens or whatever. And so we instituted appointments to try to deal with that. We've kept appointments because we're happy and the customers are happy. And there's, as I like to say, there's some people aren't happy unless they're unhappy, but we survey everyone that comes in here has a chance to respond to a survey. 95% of our customers absolutely love appointments. If you remember back in the day, you came down to the treasurer's office to pay your taxes or renew your plates or whatever, and you might have to wait for half an hour. Our average wait time is consistently under 5 minutes. We get them in, we get them out. You know that when you have an appointment and come to our office, you can get your business done and get out of there quickly. So people love it for that. And we still see, we've backed off on the requirement to have an appointment. We'll see about 20% of our volume of our traffic does not have an appointment. And that's growing a little bit, but not much. People do love the appointments. We get that there's emergencies. The other day, somebody thought they had an emergency. They came in with 15 new titles to be transferred and 20 some renewals and did not have an appointment. And I'm sorry to say, but we turned them away. We said, get an appointment. There's no way we can get you in and out in a timely fashion, in a way that's not going to cause other people to miss their appointments. We do give preference to those with appointments. So that person vowed to support the campaign of whoever ran against me and left with a red face and a little bit hot under the collar, but we're gonna stand our ground on that. Sorry to say, but it seems to be working. All right, so here's just a quick graph of trend lines for property tax payments over these last few years. And you can see the yellow line is the in-person, dropping from 35,000 to about 25 or 15,000 in traffic, which makes us happy. We have to take those payments one way or another, and if we can free up counter space and time for the people with the complicated transactions, we'd love to do that. It keeps me from having to ask the supervisors for more team members, and so therefore more volume in online and mail traffic as well. So thought it was kind of interesting. I'm going to end with a kind of I thought humorous site during my last year as I was beginning my campaign for treasurer and out putting up signs and whatnot. I ran across this sign from it was in an elementary school here in Davenport. Some young gentleman was running for treasurer of the school and thought that this was an effective way of getting out the vote. There was some much more professional looking signs out there that I saw, but this one was one of them. So I'm going to now, let me see if I can pull this off. I want to share with you something we were talking about as the meeting was about to get started. And I'm going to share a different screen. If I can get it. Oh, hang on a second. Maybe I can't. Well, I'm going to just wrap it up here though and say that I think you're probably all familiar with Beacon, which is our word for the website you use to look up properties, to look up their assessed values and maybe a layout of the property, legal description, whatever information you're looking for. You scroll down and you'll look for and find a comparable sales button. You can use that button to automatically generate comparable properties that have been sold. You can give it a date range. You can give it a distance range. You can sort by neighborhood. Hopefully you're aware of that, but if not, go out and play with it. If you can't seem to figure it out, again, give me a call. I'd be happy to walk you through that. But I'm going to stop there. We've chewed up most of an hour here and see if there are other questions that people have, either in the chat box or maybe if you want to just raise your hand. I'll try my best to answer those.
There is another question in the chat I don't think we've addressed. On our net sheet for closing in Davenport, then their assessed value, they won't get their taxes lowered with an appeal.
I'm getting a lot of static. Let me try a different.
Kathy, you just read two parts of two questions.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Now I can hear you. So let's see, on our net sheet for closing in Davenport to figure taxes owed at closing, what percent do we use for city and what percent for county? Okay, let me think about that. The best advice I can give you, I may need to, Robert, could you send me your phone number? Or I tell you what, I'm going to respond to this one to make sure that I'm accurate with this to Sharon, and she can get it out to the group. But what percent do we use for city and what percent for county? I think the best information I could give to that would be, well, let me answer it with a question. Are those the only two choices on that particular sheet? It's been so long since I've been a lender. I'm trying to remember what that looks like. Or do they have other? Do we know?
Bob, do you want to
Yeah.
unmute?
Yeah, I had to find my mute, but anyway, when we're doing a net sheet, so we look at the taxes and we got to prorate them out for closing.
Yeah.
So we always give weight. Say, I'll just pick a number, 40% for city and 60% for county. And then the number of months and everything like that. And it seems like that always kind of is unclear. Sometimes some people use 50-50, some people go 40-60. I didn't know if there was a clear-cut answer to that or not.
I'm assuming in reality, what they're really after is what portion is the city and what portion is everything else.
Right.
Because the city is on a slightly different tax year timeline than everyone else.
Correct.
And that may be why. The best place to get that information would be, again, on Beacon. You can look at the individual tax statement of any property. Let me see if I can. Well, how do I see if I can pull up that? I'm going to see if I can share this screen. Okay. All right. Are you seeing the Scott County City of Davenport
Yes.
screen? Okay. So let's I'll just use my address, although I'm not. No, let's find something in the city of Davenport. Bob, give me any address. Let me think. Here, my old house was 2709 Fremont. How about if I spell it right? And whoever owns this house now, I don't care, but you can go down to tax history and you can click on that receipt. Do you see this receipt off to the right?
I do.
And here you'll see, you should see on the back side of this, you'll see the breakdown of, in this case, City of Davenport is 42.33%.
Okay.
And by definition, everything else would be that 58, 57 and some change.
Okay.
percent. I think those are the numbers that I would suggest you use, but I'll see if I can confirm and circle back to Sharon and she can share that with the group. Could you do me a favor, Bob, and just email to the county treasurer, it'll get to me, a sample of that form that you're looking at.
Sure.
That'd be great. And then I'll make sure I'm asking the right question when I research that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question. Oh, here's one right here. Somebody's already there. Thank you, David. I'm going to, okay, why can I not? save it. Well, I'll save it. I'll get back to that later. Okay, there we go. All right. Estimate of seller's closing cost, and here's where the prorate comes. All right. Well, whose document is this? Is this a industry standard or something, or where did this come from? Do we know?
I think it's one that's, been used by most of our people, so industry standard.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll print this off then before we shut her down here, and then I'll know what I'm looking at. So, okay, great. There was another question. It would be great if the website had property report card link on all parcels. Clinton County uses Beacon and they have a link on I can't read that, on all. This PRC breaks down the total assessments. Okay, yeah, I think what you're asking here is this LT Hoyer to us is what we just talked about, where you can click on their tax statement on that, and then look at the back page, and it'll give you a breakdown. Is that what you're asking? If you want to unmute, go ahead.
Jeff?
Oh, it's
Sorry.
Jeff.
Hey, how are you, Tony?
I'm good.
Sorry about that. I'm a little illiterate on this computer and Zoom stuff.
No problem.
I'll make it quick. Property report card is a breakdown of every assessment. For example, they'll break it down to how much square foot of concrete, how much square foot of house or commercial building or whatnot. It's really an in-depth, it's the worksheet basically of the assessor.
Oh, okay.
There are a lot of standard, you can call the assessor, any of them. They've always been great about, hey, I need a PRC card for this parcel or whatnot, Davenport or county, and they'll email it to you. And
Got
it kind of gives you an insight to what could be wrong or could be right.
Mhm.
It's a great deal. I hate to say it, Clinton County's got it up there for some reason. You can just, if you get to their parcel breakdown, you just click the link and the PRC will download right into your computer.
Cool. I'll bring that up. From time to time, we look at Beacon and its capabilities for us. Obviously, everything comes with a cost. And we can find out what the cost might be and recommend to the supervisors that we consider investing in that module, if that in fact is a different module. So thank you, Jeff. I'll look into that.
Thank you.
You betcha. Are there any other questions? All right, well, we're at 2:01. Sharon, I'll let you kind of wrap it up, but thank you all for your time and attention. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did. And my number's out there. Please call me again. Call me anytime. I'd love to dig in, and I learn when I go to find answers to questions. So it helps me be a better treasurer. So I do appreciate that. But anyway, thanks again.